A blurry, high-motion photo of a luxurious dressing room in disarray flickers to life on the screen. The tension literally breaks out as the sound of muffled shouting reverberates in the background. You won't believe the sheer mayhem that just broke out behind the scenes of the most recent industry gala, leaving everyone in complete shock, from seasoned security officers to eyeless celebs. Word that Rasheeda has finally hit her breaking point is going viral on the internet, causing a complete catastrophe. Let's just say that she went nuclear rather than simply snapping. She has been playing the part of the calm, devoted wife who sticks by her husband through good times and bad for years. However, Spice's most recent revelation is said to have caused her to lose it in a way that no one anticipated. This isn't your average spat on reality TV. We are discussing a conversation that was so unpolished and unpleasant that production had to intervene before things became violent. According to witnesses, Spice entered the meeting carrying receipts that were so indisputable, so scandalous, and so intensely intimate about Rasheeda's spouse that the atmosphere practically vanished. As fans try to figure out what might be so significant that it would break the strongest woman in the game, the whispers are becoming screams. Was it a double life that had been going unnoticed for decades, a secret child, or a covert betrayal? Although Rasheeda had previously handled rumors with a grace that most people wouldn't have, the expression on her face in these leaked excerpts paints a much more sinister picture. The aroma of a collapsing empire permeates the air. The world is going to witness the aftermath from a marriage under fire, as the cameras continue to roll against all orders. It's not just spilt tea, it's boiling over, and someone is going to get burnt, so buckle up. In reality, what did Spice say to cause such a furious outburst? Keep an eye out because this situation quickly became ugly, and the fallout will alter our perception of this powerful couple. In a matter of seconds, the mood within the upscale boutique changed from one of luxury to one of absolute lethality on a typical day. As Rasheeda moved through the rows of expensive clothing, the air conditioning hummed softly in the background. She adjusted the displays with the dexterity of a lady who had spent years creating an empire from the ground up. She appeared to be the calm, collected supervisor she claimed to be. But as soon as Spice entered and the front door bells sounded, that peace fell apart. Spice walked through the store with a determined expression that caused the employees to instantly retreat into the shadows. There was no kind greeting or gentle introduction. Everyone knew that when these two women were together, the electricity in the room would begin to crackle. Business was never the only topic of conversation. Spice hurled a heavy document onto the glass counter without even waiting for Rasheeda to glance up. The sound reverberated through the quiet room like a gunshot, with her hand lingering over a silk blouse. Rasheeda hesitated and carefully turned to face her visitor, her icy indifference concealing the growing panic in her chest. What was this meant to be? She inquired. Her voice was sharp but steady, but all Spice could do was laugh, a mocking, hollow sound that made everyone in the room shudder. Spice told her that she had had enough of her buddy acting foolishly, while everyone else laughed behind her back. Additionally, she asserted that the marriage's secrets were at last beginning to come to light. Rasheeda moved closer, demanding to know what kinds of games were being played, and the tension was so thick you could virtually cut it with a knife. This time, Spice didn't think twice before starting to describe a sequence of incidents that sounded like something from a nightmare. She mentioned late-night meetings and offshore accounts that were being used to finance a life that Rasheeda had no idea about. Spice claimed to have witnesses who had seen Rasheeda's husband in places he had no business being, with individuals he had said he had cut off years ago. The accusations were flying fast and furious. In an attempt to keep her cool, Rasheeda told Spice that people were constantly attempting to destroy a prosperous black family. Spice, however, was not about to back down. With her eyes fixed on Rasheeda's, she leaned over the counter and said, "This isn't just about another woman or a moment of weakness." According to Spice, this went much deeper and involved a betrayal that affected both their personal legacy and their commercial empire. The staff stood motionless as Rasheeda's stoic wife's mask started to peel off her face, revealing a sharp, raw edge of mistrust. You could see the wheels moving in Rasheeda's mind as she attempted to make sense of the monster being depicted in front of her and the guy she shared a bed with. Every word Spice said felt like a physical blow. Spice began removing pictures from the folder and arranging them one by one on the glossy surface. And the silence in the store became more oppressive and heavy with every picture. As they became aware that they were seeing a historic collapse in real time, the fans outside the window began to notice the disturbance and pressed their faces against the glass. Spice said that a particular date on a document was the day everything changed, the day the lies grew too much to handle. As Rasheeda peered down at the evidence, her breathing became jagged and shallow. She tried to keep her hands still, but they were starting to shake. For the first time, her voice cracked as she yelled at Spice to shut up. However, Spice was unstoppable and on a roll. She reminded Rasheeda that she was deserving of better than a guy who was using her name to pave the way for his creation of a second empire at her expense. These days, the charges went beyond simple infidelity. They were about Rasheeda's financial collapse and the methodical destruction of what she had labored for. The mood changed from tense to genuine as the weight of the statements began to set in. The harm was already done when volatile Rasheeda snatched one of the pictures and tore it to pieces, hurling the shards back at Spice. It was difficult to see a path out of the dense cloud of betrayal that pervaded the air. Spice informed her that the allegations were too consistent to be disregarded, and that the streets were speaking. Rasheeda's blood froze when she mentioned a name, an old name that was meant to be forgotten and buried. It was painful to realize that her past was haunting her in such a humiliating and public manner. With her mind spinning, Rasheeda leaned against the counter for support as she attempted to comprehend the enormity of the deceit that was being presented to her. "The truth doesn't have a calendar," Spice said in response to her question about why she was doing this in front of everyone in the middle of the workday. Spice said that her actions were motivated by love. However, it felt more like an execution than an intervention when she broke the news. Every second was captured by the production crew's cameras. The lenses tightly concentrated on the fire developing in Rasheeda's eyes and the perspiration forming on her forehead. It was no longer simply about a husband and wife. The brand's viability and the reputation of a lady who had dedicated her life to striving for perfection were at stake. The dispute started to spread onto the boutique's main floor. Spice kept her position, unfazed by the growing rage, as Rasheeda paced back and forth like a caged tiger. A city noise or the far-off sound of sirens could be heard. However, the world had stopped revolving inside those four walls. Spice brought up a particular meeting that was purportedly held only 48 hours before. Rasheeda was totally excluded from the future of her own company due to commitments made during a meeting. Something inside Rasheeda cracked at that same instant. The peaceful dignity vanished, to be replaced by a primordial cry of betrayal and frustration that reverberated through the lofty ceilings. She began to remove things off the shelves. The sound of shattering glass and tumbling mannequins gave the verbal combat a wild background. Spice remained still. She only crossed her arms and informed Rasheeda that shattering things wouldn't change the reality. Even as a glass face broke inches from her feet. To this point, the claims were getting increasingly detailed, involving luxury vehicles purchased under false pretenses and travels taken under false pretenses of business. Every aspect seemed like a brand new wound. In front of everyone, Rasheeda was bleeding out. In an attempt to create drama for a plot point, she accused Spice of being a liar and a hateful person. However, Spice simply advised her to read the signatures while pointing back at the paperwork. Rasheeda recognized the signature on the bottom of the documents, a looping script she had seen countless times on birthday greetings and contracts. Her heart felt like it was being crushed by a big fist, and her limbs felt heavy as the reality of the situation seeped into her bones like freezing water. She surveyed the shop she cherished, which stood for her independence and diligence. It felt like a jail all of a sudden. Spice warned her that there was more, that this was only the beginning, and that she would lose everything by the end of the month if she did nothing. By the end of the month, the clock was running out and the threat was genuine. However, Rasheeda could hardly think clearly due to the intense emotional suffering. In an attempt to calm her voice, she inhaled deeply before telling Spice to go before she did something they would both regret. Spice wasn't done yet though. She needed to unleash one more bombshell. Something so awful that it would make everything else seem like a small argument. With a deep growl in her voice, she leaned forward and spoke about a youngster who had spent years in the shadows. The sound of two women breathing in the debris of a friendship and a marriage that was collapsing before their own eyes was all that was audible. In the ensuing complete silence, a void that engulfed all the noise of the city and the store, That quiet moment was short-lived as Rasheeda lunged toward the counter, causing the sound to explode again with twice the intensity. She raised her voice to a level no one had ever heard. Without a shred of solid evidence, she was yelling that Spice was a snake and a liar for bringing up something so harmful and sacred. However, Spice merely stood there with a pitying expression that appeared to enrage Rasheeda even more. With clothing strewn all over the floor and the smell of pricey perfume permeating the air from the shattered bottles, the store was now a complete mess. Grabbing the folder, Rasheeda started tossing the papers into the air, watching them fall like snow, but she couldn't help but notice the black and white names and dates. She was grasping her head, pacing in circles, and convincing herself that this was all a cruel joke or a horrible dream, planned by those who desired for her to fail. As she recounted that she had seen the birth certificate and had spoken to those who were being paid to keep the secret quiet, Spice followed her every step while maintaining a cool, collected tone. She revealed to Rasheeda that her husband had been leading a double life for more than 5 years, keeping a different home in a peaceful suburb where he pretended to be a loving father to a child Rasheeda was unaware even existed. It was difficult for her to breathe without feeling as though her heart would burst due to the betrayal, which was like a tangible weight bearing down on her chest. Rasheeda turned on the production team and ordered them to turn off the cameras and leave. However, they remained hidden in the corners to witness every moment of the breakdown because the drama was so captivating. Surrounded by opulence that now seemed to have been purchased with lies and blood money, she felt imprisoned in her own existence. Spice revealed that the child's mother was a member of their closest circle who had sat at their dinner table and concealed the ultimate betrayal while grinning in Rasheeda's face. At that point, the physical barrier separating them disappeared, and Rasheeda grabbed Spice by the shoulders and shook her while demanding to know the name. Spice didn't retaliate. She simply whispered, while staring Rasheeda in the eye, the name of a former assistant who mysteriously vanished from sight a few years ago. As Rasheeda saw how many people must have known the truth while she was out there defending her boyfriend to the media and the fans, the room appeared to tilt on its axis. She had a surge of nausea, the understanding that the foundation of her entire public character was made of sand, which Spice's comments were now erasing. She started laughing uncontrollably, but her laughter soon gave way to deep, racking sobs that shook her whole body. When Spice finally reached out to console her, Rasheeda shoved her away with such force that Spice stumbled back into an evening gown rack. She told Spice that she wasn't a hero for sharing this information, and that she was equally to blame as the others for keeping it a secret until it might cause the greatest harm. Rasheeda was no longer paying attention to Spice's argument that she needed to be certain of the facts before she destroyed a family. Her fingers were shaking so much that she could hardly open the screen of her phone, as she was already taking it out. The phone kept ringing as she got ready to call her husband and demand the truth once and for all. Because it was still linked to the Bluetooth system, the sound reverberated throughout the stores, making the atmosphere even more intolerable for everyone in attendance. Rasheeda hurled the phone against the wall when the call eventually went to voicemail, and watched as it broke into 100 pieces, much like her life was doing. She began yelling his name into thin air, insisting that he come and take responsibility for his actions. Spice informed her that he would not be attending, since he was probably busy trying to transfer assets before the attorneys became involved and knew that the news was breaking. Rasheeda became even more terrified after realizing that she would lose not only her marriage, but also her entire financial future. In an attempt to locate the bank statements Spice had previously referenced, she started rummaging through the papers on the ground. With a feverish determination, she scanned the numerals. According to the reports that surfaced, throughout the previous 18 months, hundreds of thousands of dollars were allegedly transferred into private accounts, funds that were meant to go for their retirement and joint enterprises. While she was preoccupied with being the brand's face, she felt foolish for entrusting him with the keys to the kingdom. When she asked Spice how many other people were aware of this, he acknowledged that it was turning into the industry's worst-kept secret. Now that the fans were filming through the windows with their own phones, it was beginning to dawn on them that by sunset, this would be on every blog and news website. The bright lights inside the store felt like heat lamps in an interrogation room, and Rasheeda sensed the walls closing in. She reached for a bulky mannequin and shoved it aside. She shouted at the top of her lungs, the thunderous thump resonating through the flooring. The agony was unbearable and was erupting in a ferocious, disorderly outburst of energy that was threatening to devour all in its path. Rasheeda claimed that she no longer cared about the police, the store, or anything else when Spice advised her to leave before the police were called. She was determined to obtain both answers and blood, and she would not give up until she did. She began to discuss all the instances in the past when she had forgiven him. In order to preserve his reputation, she had lied to her own family on numerous occasions and accepted public apologies. As she described the years of loyalty that had been rewarded with the utmost disdain, the resentment was like poison in her mouth, coating every word. She asked Spice if the kid resembled him. It was a broken whisper and inquiry. Rasheeda felt a severe pain in her stomach and doubled over as Spice nodded slowly. Managing a mistress was one thing, but dealing with an entire family was a level of betrayal she was unable to comprehend. She took another look at the pictures, concentrating on the ones where he was holding a young child in a park and appeared to be a contented father. Those pictures served as a sharp reminder of the life he was leading while she worked 24 hours a day to maintain their company. She came to the conclusion that he was probably hiding in his hidden home with his secret family every time he claimed to be at a late-night recording session or a business meeting in a different city. The melancholy was beginning to give way to the anger, a cold, calculating fire that was evident in the way her stance straightened and her eyes tightened. She threatened to set everything on fire, she told Spice. She was referring to more than just the store's merchandise. She was referring to the name, the heritage, and the man who had crossed her. Spice cautioned her that making choices while in this state would ultimately harm her. However, Rasheeda was incapable of hearing logic. With a frenzied energy, she began gathering her personal possessions and stuffing them into a fancy bag, her thoughts already focused on the next confrontation. She was going straight to the house to pack his things and toss them into the street, so she assured the production crew that if they wanted a show, they were going to get the finest show on earth. The spectacle was evolving from a personal meltdown to a public fight for justice, and the atmosphere in the room was changing from one of shock to one of somber anticipation. Spice took one last hold of her arm as she strode toward the door and asked if she was truly prepared for what lay ahead. Rasheeda stated that she had been prepared for years, while merely giving her a lifeless stare. She was simply unaware of it until today. The doors opened, and she was struck by a wall of heat from the outside world, as well as the flashes of 12 cameras from the paparazzi who had gathered at the entryway. She did not duck her head or cover her face. With her head held high, she strolled through the throng. Like a crime scene, the wreckage of her shattered boutique was left behind. She felt as though she was leaving her former life behind and entering a frightening and unpredictable future with each step. However, she was not going to disappear into the night. At the curb, the automobile was waiting. Nothing will ever be the same again, she realized as she stepped into the back seat and gazed out the window at the store bearing her name. Watching the automobile go out into the dense traffic, Spice stood in the doorway. She continued to hold the evidence folder. It was already being referred to as the end of an era in the headlines of the first news that appeared online. Rasheeda sat in the back seat with a stone quiet that was much more unnerving than her screaming minutes before as the automobile raced through the city streets. Her thoughts were consumed by the picture of that secret house and the secret existence that had been made possible by her own diligence, even as she saw the city's flickering lights. With a chilly intensity that suggested she was going into survival mode, she took her secondary phone.